Hello, welcome to Learn, Do, Become Radio. I'm April Perry. Today we're talking about how to get things done with the time that we have. Several people had asked me how to estimate time to get things done. Because let's say that you need to make a phone call about an insurance issue, then you want to work with your child to clean their bedroom, and then you want to outline the main points for a presentation that you're giving at work. Okay, so those are three things that are going to take some time during the day, and you might guess the phone call will take 15 minutes, cleaning the room will take a couple of hours, and then you can outline the presentation in 30 minutes. So if you kind of guess that, and then you plan your day around it, what happens if you really underestimated how long it was going to take? Then you get to the end of the day and you're thinking, I didn't get these things done, or it took too long, or you're feeling frustrated with yourself. So today I'm sharing my personal secrets or methods for getting things done in the time I have. And my commitment to you is by the end of this podcast, you will have the tools to jump into the work that you need and want to do without the stress. If you're new, Learn to Become helps people who are overwhelmed by the details of life to create simple systems so they can do what matters most. We want to help people stop drowning in piles, be able to spend time with their families, wake up excited, go to bed content. And I'm so happy that you're here. Now, as I was saying, I'm going to help you to have the tools to jump into the work that you want and need to do. You may have felt a little unsettled, and you may have thought, April, you have no idea how much is on my plate, or how much backlog I have, or how overwhelmed I am. But I want you to take a deep breath and please trust me. I used to make super long lists for each day, and it would have tons of tasks and projects on the list, but they all felt very urgent to me. But I would totally overestimate what I could do in a day, and then I ended up forwarding everything that was undone to the next day, and then I would go to bed highly discouraged. And this went on for years. This is probably started in high school with the long lists, and then went well into when I had 3 children and 4 children, and we were just drowning. There was so much going on, and I felt like no matter what I do, I'm never going to have enough time to finish my lists. But now I complete my lists every day. And occasionally there's something I don't get to, so I can renegotiate. But for the most part, my lists are focused and short. They get done every day. I haven't had a pile in my life for over 15 years. Like, there are no paper piles. There's no piles of stuff in a closet. There's no piles of stuff in a garage. Everything is organized. Like, I know where everything is that I own. And it's not because I'm magic and I'm not a super minimalist. It's just really organized. Also, I'd say I'm more productive now than I've ever been. It doesn't mean I do more tasks. It means I do the tasks that are most important and move things forward that need to move forward. That's a distinction I was glad that I learned. And I also take a nap every day, and I currently am enjoying life without any anxiety, which is the first time I've been able to say that in a long time. But I want you to have that too, okay? So let's dive in. I'm going to walk through some key points that I think will be helpful for you. Now, I talked about those 3 scenarios: the phone call for the insurance, cleaning a child's room, and outlining a presentation. I'm going to get back to those in a moment, but first I just want to review 5 principles that I think need to be understood and maybe accepted and agreed upon before we dive into that. So I've just put together these 5 things that I think are really pertinent to this discussion, and come to the show notes page if you'd like to read them or review them. I will also have a YouTube video where I make a more visual representation of this. If you want to check that out, just go find Learn, Do, Become on YouTube. Okay. All right. So principle number 1 is to create buffer. So when I think about buffer, I just think about having empty space. Or at first I started thinking about, when you go bowling and they can put those little inflatable things in the gutters. So if you bring children bowling, they're bowling balls will actually hit the pins and they won't go into the gutters. So I love this idea of having just this buffer so that you aren't going to schedule every minute of every day. And there are a few sub-principles that go with this. For example, I love the 1/3 rule, which means if you look at your open day and you see, oh, I have 9 hours today that are generally open. Let's say it's a Saturday, or maybe it's a day where you have off work or a day you're home, whatever. Okay, but if you only plan 3 hours of work into that 9-hour span, then you can still do things with those other, hours, but you're not going to have them you're not committed to doing it, and you're not stressed if you don't get it done, and it's not on your daily task list. And we'll talk more about where this will go in a second. But the 1/3 rule, that's made my life amazing. Okay. Second, it's great to have options ready to go for those extra hours, and that's where we use our next actions list. This is a context-based list where we have home, phone, errands, computer to discuss. They're little 10-minute next actions that you could just do in those little pockets of time. So I love having my options ready to go. Another thing that helps buffer-wise is to get places that you need to be early and plan to do some tasks or things while you're waiting there. This not only helps you to get where you need to be on time, but it gives you this buffer and space where you could say, oh yeah, I need to, send a text to so-and-so, or I need to, call this place and see if they have this item I need, or whatever. If you can say, oh, I'm going to get to the dentist 20 minutes early and I'll just sit out in the parking lot for a minute and get a couple of these things done, it just gives you that quiet space. I mean, unless you have a bunch of children in the car that don't want to give you quiet space, depending on your stage of life, I'll just say that. But some type of getting somewhere early and having that buffer is just a good thing to think about. All right, principle number 2 is to be a time and focus leader. Especially in meetings for work or meetings for volunteer organizations, or even as you sit down to do your own work, I like to just think of myself as a time and focus leader where you're not militant saying nobody can have any conversation that isn't specifically about the topics we're here to discuss. I don't want to make it sound like we're not able to just be personable and have fun. But what I found is, let's say I get together, I kind of do this in social situations. Like, for example, we had a couple of friends who came to visit from out of town, and they'd contacted us weeks in advance and asked if we could go to dinner together. So we scheduled it on our calendar and we get to dinner. Well, after a couple of minutes of just talking and seeing how they're doing, I said in this specific situation, okay, I'm not trying to be too strict, and I'm not trying to be too focused and meeting-like, but I would love to know your outcome vision for this dinner. What would you like us to discuss, or what are you hoping will happen during this dinner? Because sometimes the people will say, oh, well, yeah, we actually wanted to ask you some questions about this, or how you did family and work-life balance, or we have this thing coming up and we just thought you might have some good perspective on it. I just like to know from the beginning, because otherwise you end up chit-chatting for the whole time, and then at the very end they say, oh yeah, we wanted to ask you this question, and now it's going to take 45 more minutes that maybe you didn't have. So whether it's a social experience or a work meeting, I just like to say, by the end of this meeting, here is what I hope will have happened. And then during the meeting, making sure if, we start going off on rabbit trails or getting distracted, we can do occasional little time checks. Hey, just FYI, we have 15 minutes left and we haven't quite covered all these things. Our daughter, Leah, has been doing this really well for us too. Like if we're ever in a meeting or a call, or even if she and I are just getting together and we're doing work for Learn to Become, if I start getting distracted, she'll say, hey, why don't we put this on the list for next time? Let's stay focused. Or sometimes I'll do the same if one of us goes off. But it's just nice to think of ourselves as time and focus leaders, because that puts more of the, more power, and it's not like more control. I need to be in control of everything. But I think it gives us that encouragement and power that we can make an impact when we are working with other people or when we're needing to focus ourselves. All right, principle number 3 is to plan for the open loops of the project or task that we wouldn't be able to complete. Now, an open loop is where you have an extra little task or sub-project or something that will need to be completed before the bigger project or the bigger goal is complete or met, okay? So, for example, our daughter Grace came over today. She helps record our YouTube videos. And we were talking about open loops, this concept. And she was saying, well, how would you really define an open loop? What would you say? And I said, okay, well, let's look at what we're doing here with YouTube. We are recording all of these YouTube videos, and I've got these outlines, and you've got your editing and things you need to do. But the open loop is right now, all of the footage is on my phone that needs to be airdropped to your computer, and you need to take photos of these outlines so you know the order that some of these things go in, and we need to, figure out what the links are that are going to go with the video, things like that. Like those are kind of open loops. We haven't quite decided on that. So let's say you're working on something and maybe it's a big project, and then you have to stop because you run out of time. A lot of times we feel frustrated because we have all of this stuff that we just got out for the project. These are the things that usually sit in piles on our desks. Or we did a podcast with Melanie Maxwell years ago. It's February 2019. If you want to go find it, episode 43. And she shared that she had one day put a bunch of stuff on her bed because she got it out for a project. But then she didn't want to put it away because it already took so much effort. So she left it on her bed, but then she kept adding things to her bed. And she ended up sleeping, I think, in an armchair in the living room for a year because she never got back to her room, which just became kind of covered in piles. And on our podcast show notes page for that podcast, we have a before and after where she shows us her bedroom before and her bedroom after. And it was amazing. She could sleep in her bed again. It was awesome. And, your situation might look different, but I just want to recognize there's no shame if we can't get everything done in the time that we had allotted. It's really normal. But then we just need to say, okay, all this stuff that's making up my open loops, are they projects or tasks? Who owns this next step? When will it get done? How will we follow up? And that's also why we have things like our support materials with our Step Command Central, so you have places to put things and you know where to go to get them when it's time to work on the project again. So just being able to plan ahead for those open loops and know you can add them to a next in line projects list. You could make a calendar reminder. You could put something on a next actions list. But you can still close up your brain and close up the project even though it's not done, knowing you'll get back to it when it's appropriate. That's really the whole purpose of the Step Command Central. So your brain can focus on what you need to focus on. You get back to it when you need to. All right. Principle number 4 is to work in microbursts. We talk about microbursts all the time. It's maybe a 10 to 20 minute task. That's very simple. Or maybe you've heard of that Pomodoro timer. You can just turn it on in your computer and it gives you, I think it's 25 minutes, something like that, where you work for these little microbursts and then you give yourself a break. And so this is awesome because it feels easier on our brains. And I don't know if you have ever used the Great Courses app. It was called Wondrium for a while. Now it's Great Courses again. But there was a course on there called Outsmart Yourself. And it said it was brain-based strategies for a better you. So I think I listened to maybe 75% of it. And then they have this awesome PDF that goes with it that gives you all of it in written form. So I actually really do love the Great Courses. But one of the things that was awesome is that in that course about outsmarting yourself, I learned that our brains actually tell us we're tired way before we're actually depleted. So for example, let's say I'm out jogging. Like I'm not a jogger, but let's say I was. And there comes a point your brain will say, hey, I'm so tired, I've got to stop running. Like I can't run anymore. Well, our brains tell us that in order to just conserve energy and prevent burnout. But typically when we feel that, we have quite a bit more left in the tank. So that helps me to understand that when I get tired, I'm thinking like, okay, my brain is trying to protect me. That's why microbursts work so well, because it's just 10 minutes. Your brain says, oh, that's okay. That's why when they talk about jogging, if you jog really fast, do a sprint for a minute and then stop, and then do a sprint for a minute. It's actually really good on your brain because your brain says, oh, I can do it for a minute. I'm not going to die. So anyway, that was kind of a fun thing to learn. So yes, microbursts, quick, focused working sessions. And then the fifth principle I'm sharing today is just turn off notifications on your phone. Like right now as I'm recording, my phone is on sleep mode. So, and the screen is down. I'm not going to hear it. I'm not going to look at it. I just want to be able to focus on recording. But so often we cause our own distractions. And so we sit down to work on something and then we end up going into our phone for, oh, I got a text. Oh, I got a call. Oh, I have to check this. And so we're context switching. Our brain is going from our phone back to the task, to the phone, to the task. And we make things just take longer. So I just recommend getting the phone out as much as possible. So with those 5 principles in mind, let's just talk about the 3 scenarios that we discussed at the beginning. So, okay, phone call about an insurance issue. Here are a few of the principles that we discussed that will apply here. First is having buffer. So I would never make an insurance phone call when I have a deadline, something else happening in 10, 15 minutes. Even if I think it's only going to take 15 minutes, you don't know if the insurance agent is going to have a problem or a question or have to talk to a supervisor or something like that, or there's a long hold, and you don't want to have to call back and start the circus all over again. So creating buffer is amazing. Also, I want to be a time and focus leader whenever I'm on the phone with any business, because what typically happens is the person that I'm working with will very often, and I don't want to be unkind about this, but I just have a really hard time with phone agents, where maybe they aren't quite sure what they're trying to do, or they're not sure who to talk with, or they might not quite understand what you need. And so just being aware and helping move the conversation where it needs to go and considering yourself to be a leader when you're in these situations can be helpful. Of course, being very kind. I worked community or customer support and like organizational sales for Franklin Covey back when I was in college. So I was on the phone with people all the time doing like all kinds of things. And whether it was a problem with an order or a need or someone wanted help with something, like, yeah, I was that person on the other end. So I always try to be very kind, but sometimes you do need to be the leader. And then one other just thing to think about is planning for those open loops, because typically when I have a call with an insurance company or something like that, I will need to follow up on at a distant time. So a couple weeks ago, I actually had this situation. So I was speaking with someone about what the insurance had paid and kind of how things were going. And the person said, well, I need to call this doctor's office and see if they'll approve this. And then we need to change how much you owe. And I said, okay, will you give me a call back? And she said, well, maybe. Why don't you call back in a week or two if you don't hear from me? So this is something I add as a calendar reminder. I put mine in Asana. That's just where I keep it. So I'd go add a calendar reminder to call. And then in the description, I took a little photo of the bill. And on the bill, I'd written down the name of the person, what we talked about, what she said, who she was going to call, what she was going to do. So when I call back, I just have all that information right there. It's not a big deal. Okay, but that's hopefully going to help you with any insurance phone calls or things like that you need to make. All right, now let's look at the cleaning the room. I actually love cleaning with my children. I feel like it's a time to connect. It's a time to hear what they think about their space and their, the objects in their room and their prized possessions and what they're excited about. And often it becomes something that's very connective. So I always want to put a buffer there where I'm not rushing. And then also working in microbursts. That's great when you're working, especially with young children, where you can say, hey, we're going to work for 10 minutes on this closet. We're going to work for 10 minutes on the toys under the bed. And then you could take little breaks or come back or do something fun in the middle. But that's been really helpful to just have microbursts. And even hearing our children now talk about their microbursts, it makes me so happy. And then also, you probably will need to plan for open loops when you do something like a room cleaning. When Spencer and I cleaned his room together a few weeks ago, we ended up with several piles. Like, okay, all these piles need to go in the donation area downstairs, but first he was going to look through them and see if there were any other things he needed to pull out. Then there was a pile of stuff that needed to go in other places in the house. And then he had, I think, like a couple things we needed to move out of the room. So even though we'd worked for a couple of hours, the room wasn't done. There were still some open loops in order for it to be done. So we just said, okay, we'll check back in on this tomorrow. We'll, think about this for a while. Some things need calendar reminders. Some things you can just kind of incubate, right? But you want to just make sure that anytime you have to close the project or close the activity, you can go ahead and pick back up where you need to when it's the right time and your brain knows that. And then that final one for the presentation, getting that outlined for work. I think it's really important for us to be a time and focus leader when we are doing projects alone. And this also relates beautifully with turning off the phone. So many times we procrastinate things that feel hard. So if you think, I've got an outline for a presentation, sometimes our brain will say, oh my goodness, that is so hard. When really, if you just sit down, turn off your phone, say, hey, I'm going to work for 10 minutes on it, you can probably get quite a bit done and just move forward. So I finally got to the point I just don't procrastinate. I just break it down to be a very, very simple next action, and I jump in and work in microbursts and get that done. So, okay, so those are those 3 scenarios. I hope that just gives a little perspective as you think about how to estimate how much time something will take. Because, really, yes, we can always guess. We can say, okay, usually it takes me about half an hour. Usually it takes me a couple hours. My mom would always say, let's double it. Like anything you think it'll take this much time, just double it and give yourself that buffer. But I just hope that we can understand that we can get things done in the time that we have using some of these skills and principles that we talked about today. Another thing my mom always said was, begin. The rest is easy. And I love that. I would just add, begin and apply the 5 principles that we covered today, and the rest is easy. So I hope that you are having a wonderful time here at Learn, Do, Become. I have just loved being in our community Facebook group and our Step Mastery Facebook group and our Rise Facebook group and engaging with our community members. I just so appreciate each one of you, and thank you for the comments that you share on the website, in our YouTube channel, and social media. It just means so much to be part of the conversation and to be learning and growing with each other. So, okay, hope you have an amazing day. Please share our podcast with your friends if you know people who would also like to get out of overwhelm. We would love that. And we can't wait to see you soon at learndobecome.com.